Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Rasco.
And today we're going to tell you how we felt about X-Men Apocalypse, the third in our kind of X-Men prequel slash soft reboot trilogy that is also doing a lot of work to set up the next era of X-Men films, possibly another trilogy or however we end up going. Complicated thing, X-Men, Rasco, and that's always been true in the comics, in the movies. If you don't watch the X-Men movies, it is a weird thing to talk about where we're at with this thing right now.
Yeah, like, they talk about with the Marvel, the MCU, like, how they're like, oh, we don't care about continuity anymore. Well, X-Men clearly has, well, like, they don't care about people who are not caught up with continuity being lost, with Civil War, at least.
Yeah.
Well, X-Men got to that point a while ago. It's gotten to that point where if you're not paying attention, things are not going to make sense.
Well, that's a really good point, and maybe not a bad thing to start with before we jump into a really brief synopsis, which is, I don't know that you can walk in fresh on an X-Men movie anymore. Maybe spin-offs. Like, I don't think you needed to watch X-Men movies to see Deadpool.
Yeah, not
necessarily, although without giving too much away, there was at least one thing that made me go, oh cool, Deadpool like retroactively referenced this movie. But anyway, so X-Men Apocalypse, we've got Apocalypse, who the villain, who is a ancient mutant, the first mutant, who touts himself up like he's a god because he has so many more and varied powers than any other mutant, and he has been awakened and come back in the present day and about to wreak havoc. He pulls together some of our New Mutants and Magneto in a in effort to take over the world again as the Four Horsemen, and meanwhile you've got Professor X leading his school, which is fully set up now, and is and we're introducing a lot of characters, Rasco, that we used to be dealing with a lot before this this version of the franchise, and even a couple of other characters that had only had singular appearances before this and got as much or less to do than they did in those films. And as I said, we're tying up some loose ends, but we're also setting up some things to come, especially with Cyclops and Jean Grey and a couple of other mainstay X-Men characters that will, I'm sure, solidify their spots as major X-Men when we get to the 1990s film and we get what I hope is the cartoon show in live action. So now we're going to go over to Rasco, and he's going to tell us what how he felt about X-Men Apocalypse.
Okay, well, this movie made me feel like I was watching a mediocre First Class 3 and a good X-Men 1.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At the same time.
At the same time. What was mediocre about it?
I think it's not necessarily that they handled anything poorly with the relationships between the triad that we've kind of had through the first goal. It's more of like a quad, like a 4-point shape. But we have Beast, Mystique, Charles, and Eric. And we didn't get to flesh out their relationship as much in this film as we have in First Class and Days of Future Past, where those movies, they really focus on those characters. And this movie is kind of a weird thing where it's after, it goes to show that it's almost as if they view Days of Future Past more like it's not First Class 2, it's X-Men 4 and First Class 2. So this movie isn't so much like First Class 3 all the way as it is like a new X-Men 1, but it's still dealing with some of the things that we've been dealing with First Class and Days of Future Past, Charles and Eric and Mystique. And now we're dealing with that, but we can't fully invest time into those characters because we have to set up all these new characters. And it's not that the new characters are set up poorly. I think that's the best part of the movie. I really liked all of the new all the new cast members and the new roles. And that was what got me really excited moving forward. And it's just that it's not that they handled anything poorly with the relationships from the First Class movies, but it's that we didn't get to fully go into where they are as people at this point. And there's things that is left out. Like, there's still things that I have questions about with Mystique and what she did after First Class regarding Weapon X.
Again, try not to give too much away, but with regards to that, I don't think it's a matter of there's anything else to know. I think they're not even trying on that. When we get into this movie. Which way would you flip your sign?
I would have to say that I'm feeling it, because I came out of this movie really excited for the next X-Men movie, and it's like it's really weak it's just really weak on the story side when it comes to those characters that we've really, I feel like there's a lot there's a lot of ways they could have well, there's not a lot of ways that, like, the weird thing is that this movie parallels First Class in a lot of ways. So, like, we start off with Moira, and she is on something, and she discovers something. The same way she does in First Class, where she goes into the club, and, like, she discovers this whole thing. And there's this mutant who's got all these kind of henchmen mutants that you don't really learn much about, really, other than, oh, look, they're cool. And, like, so you have this really powerful mutant, and he perverts Magneto, and this mutant, so we had Shaw, it was Shaw, right?
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon. He was responsible for Magneto becoming this Frankenstein's monster, as he calls himself in the movie. And now we have, like, Apocalypse isn't responsible for why Magneto's in such a broken state, but he kind of inadvertently is, because that earthquake caused the thing to fall on the guy that made Magneto push the thing over to save him. But, not to, like, spoil anything. But,
yeah.
This is a movie where, like, Apocalypse kind of perverts Magneto and turns him to his side, and that's where we go. And it parallels First Class in that way. And then there are things towards the end that you can't say without spoilers, but there are a lot of things where we're doing things and we're calling back to First Class, and in that way it does feel like First Class 3, but not fully.
Yeah.
It still feels like an X-Men reboot at the same time. It's really weird.
Yeah, I feel much the same way you do, Rasco. I'll go ahead and flip my sign and then give some thoughts. This movie made me feel like the lenses in my nostalgia goggles fell out. I think and it's weird to say that because there are, some of my favorite things in this are fan service things, but like comic book fan service things. And there are places where that feels like it's the thing that's dragging me through it, so in that way, my nostalgia goggles are fully intact, but I guess I should say my previous X-Men movie franchise nostalgia goggles are done. I feel like we are, with this movie, banking a little bit too hard on all of the callbacks and references to the other movies that Bryan Singer has been involved in. It worked really well in Days of Future Past because that was, as you say, X-Men 4 as much as it was First Class 2. All the stuff going back to X2, I really appreciated, partly because I love that movie, and you know it hit me in, again, a nostalgic place, but also it was all relevant for what was going on with the characters that I was finding emotionally resonating. And this movie, I didn't find anything that was as emotionally resonating as I did with that, and I felt like there wasn't really a story here. I hate to say, like there's the skeleton of one, and I could see how if you spent more time on it, we could have really pulled some threads out and stuff. But it feels like where we had Xavier, and impossible not to compare this to Days of Future Past. In some places, it's like pushing the comparisons on you too much, and that's why and that makes it really difficult not to look at that. And of course, it's also a direct sequel to that. Andy is trying to build on some things that did, especially with Mystique as the hero, that you know all that stuff. But like, where Xavier and Magneto are in Days of Future Past felt like a really natural thing, and like their story wasn't completed yet. And I'm not sure we've got anything else to say about them with this film. I feel like we have to kind of contrive reasons to get them to places where they feel we're trying to manufacture this dramatic situations, and yes, when you're writing stories, you're always manufacturing them. The trick is to make it feel natural, like it's not being manufactured. And I don't think this is quite getting us there. And that was really unfortunate for me. So you get things like we go back and do and like I thought that that Quicksilver was one of actually the stronger characters in the movie, but we do another stop time Quicksilver comedy scene just like we did with Days of Future Past, and it's funny, but it feels a little bit too much like this is the thing that the fans really liked, so we'll give it to them again. And there was quite a bit of that in this, where it was like the things that really hit people with Days of Future Past they tried to recreate instead of forging ahead. So while I'm with you that by the end of the movie, I think with one or two exceptions that I can't talk about here, and we'll get into stuff on the spoiler cast on Sunday, I'm excited moving forward. I don't think that we've wrecked anything. I think that we've got things in a really interesting place by the end of this. But as a movie, as a story, mediocre is the operative word here, I think. The bottom line for me is we need maybe, especially with as many characters as we try to cram into every movie and stuff, I think maybe we need a good 3 or 4 years between each of these. This felt like a rush job to me. And I think that was its biggest drawback, is it feels like it felt like there was a little bit of fatigue from the production staff making this movie, that like if only we'd had another year to really develop it, because there's so many different characters we're trying to deal with, and like looking at trailers, I thought Apocalypse would be fascinating. He felt like just villain of the week to me.
It's the thing of I find Apocalypse inherently interesting just based off of, because I will say that you do get a motivation for Apocalypse. Like,
I'm not saying you don't, but I expected more of an argument. You know what I mean?
And it's just that he doesn't convey the argument.
No, and you're right. He is inherently interesting, but I gotta look at the pieces apart from what I already know about that character.
Yeah.
And when you do that, there's not nearly as much there as there ought to be. And I also think it might have been a misstep to go to Apocalypse here. I think jumping off of Days of Future Past, we've got to fix the future. We got this post-apocalyptic future. Maybe Apocalypse isn't the next thing to do. Now, I wasn't thinking that until I saw the movie. But the problem is, the stakes are technically higher, and they don't feel higher. They feel a lot smaller to me with this one.
It's really strange because there's never like a point in this movie where you're clearly like, until the there's never a point in this movie where you're clearly like, okay, so this is the story this is the path that we're following now. Like, this is the narrative unfolding to us. You're kind of watching things happen, and I made a joke about this after Steve had seen the movie, and he just gave like his like brief opinion on it, and I was like, so it's like a Richard Linklater movie mixed with an X-Men movie, where like Richard Linklater, he does movies like Dazed and Confused, which has like, it's not really about a particular character. It just characters kind of get arcs. You kind of like, they start one place, they end in a slightly different place, but it's really meandering. It's not really about any one particular person. That really describes this movie well, because it doesn't really have a story. It's got it's got events that all happen at one after the other. That doesn't make it necessarily a story with themes that are going through the entire narrative.
Yeah, and I don't measure narrative by whether or not there's like a really clear, obvious theme, because you've seen movies that do that and are terrible. But I'm not, like I said, nobody's really emotionally resonating with me like they were with the other movies. I will say that it is not wholly Mystique's movie like some people were worried it would be.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. I don't know how I feel about some of that, and I don't even want to say anything here. But like, but at least it's not all about her. So you know that's a really good thing. I'll go ahead, man. Flipping my sinus tough on this one, because I think it's a mediocre story. I don't think it's a great movie. I will say that it didn't really grab me till the second act. Or, excuse me, till like the midway point even, which I was really surprised by. Like I was watching it, like I was just indifferent to it through a lot of it until I got to the second half, and that was mostly again comedy and bringing in some comic book stuff that was exciting. Where it was just, there were choices I liked, but within the context of the narrative, it was just kind of okay, cool. You decided to do this. I like that. It doesn't make the narrative effective really, and I mean, like, I was really excited for this one. Like I was hoping for and hoping I could expect. Just pushing forward from Days of Future Past, and it felt a little bit obligatory. It was like, here's another X-Men thing. We got to do that every couple of years, and that is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, my hopes were really high for this movie. This was my most anticipated movie potential. I think this was my most anticipated movie of this year just because of how much I love Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
And I just think that it was a really weird movie for them to make. Yeah,
I mean, I didn't find anything really offensive or like even on a just storytelling like that really insulted me, or it's not a terrible experience. But it doesn't remotely live up to what they had with the first two, and they kind of joke about that a little bit, but that doesn't make me any less disappointed with that. I don't know. I mean, like maybe my hopes were too high, but then that's why I say it should have been another year or two. Like I think part of what was so successful about Days of Future Past was they made us wait for it. Our palate was wet for more X-Men. Part of the reason First Class was so successful is because our palate was wet for X-Men. It had been a while. And with this, it was Days of Future Past was successful. People loved it. We got to pump another one out. And there's going to be maybe some X-Men fatigue now. And I hate that. Put some, especially if you're going to do a spin-off movie, especially if you're going to have Deadpool and Gambit and that stuff. Like, let's have 3 or 4 years between our tentpoles.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where this movie doesn't even try to hit on like the beats that you typically would hit on when you're concluding a trilogy of films. Like, if you're going into it expecting like a Return of the Jedi type film where you're like finally concluding all of these loose threads with characters, and like they're going to fully explore that and fulfill everything that you want from those relationships in the third act of the thing. It's not that. Like, it doesn't view itself as that at all.
The question is, can it be? Like, should we have really, tried to conceive of this movie as the end of a trilogy? I feel like with Moira and stuff, I feel like some of that is a little bit forced, where like I realized that there was something to wrap up with that, but I don't feel like anybody was even thinking about it until they got to this movie. Oh yeah, that's right, that thing with Moira, right? Like here's the thing. I want to say maybe I said this when we talked about Days of Future Past a couple years ago, but that movie would have been a perfect way to end X-Men. Just X-Men. Just finish it and then imagine what happens after it. Glad we're getting more, glad we're getting to go back and salvage characters that we didn't get to really do anything with and get to see the earlier, more popular versions of them that we can really do, sink our teeth into and stuff. That's awesome, but I'm starting to think, and I'm not saying that that you couldn't have made the movie that made me not think this, but I'm starting to think that we were kind of done with this version of Xavier Magneto as the central characters of these movies, as opposed to putting them in the background and having them be the mentor characters again.
Yeah, it's weird because like I think the characters have changed more than they've changed from some of the characters have changed from where they were at the end of Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Between movies. So, like, you don't come into this movie being like, oh, see, that's where he was, that's where she was at the end of that film, so this is where, obviously, they'd be here now. Like, it's like, oh, this person is here. And so it's weird. It's setting up things for the future, but I can't get into this because, obviously, this would be spoilers, but there are very specific beats where it's hitting on some of the same stuff that it was doing in First Class.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's trying to be a third thing. but it doesn't really hit on that. Like, it doesn't actually delve into those what you would expect a concluding chapter to do.
Well, and that's what we did between, and I mean, we knew this was going to happen, of course, but like that's what we did between First Class and Days of Future Past, where each of these is set in the next decade. We're going to do it again with the next one. And like, there's always, so like, we're always just checking in. And the problem with that approach, especially moving forward, I mean, it was okay with 2, I think, but like, the problem with doing it a lot now is, with all these years in between, it forces you in a place where you have to do a lot of things all at once in one movie, that it's impossible not for it not to feel kind of convenient that all these things are all happening simultaneously. At least with Apocalypse, we're able to have kind of a decent excuse for why a bunch of new mutants would all come together at the same time. So like, that's good. But there are a couple things where I'm like, well, that's a little convenient. Like, we did the best we could, but like, it had to seem convenient because there's like 10 years in between. Well, there's exactly 10 years in between. And, I mean, like, you know, this is a thing that that we all thought was really weird between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, the 8-year gap. We do it every time with X-Men now.
Yeah. It's kind of a weird thing where...
But again, I expected that, and I guess I just assumed that it would be a little bit better handled, but then... now that I've seen the movie, I don't know necessarily how it could have been. Maybe it's trying to do too much at once, but I also think there might have needed to have been another pass through that script.
Yeah, it's X-Men. It's hard for X-Men to be something like Indiana Jones or James Bond, where you can kind of just like come in and do like a story with one character, and it's not really convenient because it's one character. For him, for something to happen, for an opportunity for change to happen for him is not that. Unless it's one guy, it happens to people. But for when you're talking about an ensemble cast of characters that aren't even necessarily communicating with each other directly that much between the movies, for all of them to be brought into the same scenario again feels sometimes a little bit too convenient. And that's the issue that you get when you just kind of make it spread out by so many years. Take
no stock whatsoever in my flip. This is almost a toss of the coin right now, because like, I don't think I'm feeling it on a story level, but then as Rasco said, I'm excited still about things that we set up and moving forward, and I like some choices that were made, and it will be fun to watch this again for certain things. So like, I'm in a really ambivalent place on this movie. I think this is going to be one of the most lukewarm feelings I'm going to put up. I guess that's where I'm going to go, and I feel like I'm doing that more as an X-Men fan than anything, so I'm not even comfortable with it, Rasco. I feel like I need to be read on this. I just don't know.
You know, if it was any other franchise, I might be read on it, but here's the thing, like, X-Men movies, like, the good ones, I just love the good, the like, very clearly good X-Men movies for me are so good.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm willing to be like, okay, this wasn't a stellar entry in the franchise.
It's way middle of the road.
There's places to go with this. It's a very similar feeling to X-Men 1, the first X-Men movie.
Yeah, and I had that too, and that's interesting because it's a setup movie, but it's also a closer thing. But yeah, there's besides X-Men 1 though, there's nothing else to compare it to. It's not X3, it's not Origins, it's not insulting. It's just not. It's just story-wise. It's kind of uninspired, I think. I want to mention real quick a couple of other notes. As I said, kind of a slow start. I'm excited that the X2 theme is still being just totally solidified as the X-Men theme.
Yeah, I'm really glad about that too.
Glad we're still doing that.
At the ending credits, I was just like, oh my god, this music's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. It ain't the Days of Future Past soundtrack, and it ain't the X2 soundtrack, but it's pretty good. As I said, I'm glad Mystique's not the whole movie. Mystique does keep saying things that just don't make sense. She has this habit, and I'm going to throw out a trailer line because I thought this sounded weird in the trailer, and then I saw it in context. I was like, yeah, that's really weird. She likes to put things in absolutes and make two ideas, like, maybe I should save this for the spoiler cast, but I'll mention it here real quick. She had, because this was one of the things that took me most out of the movie, Rasco, where she likes to take two things and act like they're mutually exclusive when they're not. So she has that line that she has in the trailer where she's like, where Cyclops says, "I can't control my powers," and then she says, "Then don't embrace them." Because those are two ideas that go together. like somehow learning to control your powers is also denying you have them. Like, what if he accidentally shot her in the face? Then she'd kind of wish that he'd learned to control them. It's like, no, if you know how to use your powers, then you're not fully embracing them. And she has lines like that 2 or 3 times in the film.
Yeah.
I thought that was weird. And that might sound like a nitpick to people, but the problem is they feel like the crux of her character now. Of like some of those things are like what define her, and I don't think we have a real great handle on who she is in this installment. I think there was a little bit of difficulty in deciding what exactly she was going to be after the hero moment at the end of Days of Future Past.
Yeah, which is really tough, because I think that for me at least, like Mystique for me, I really like Mystique in both First Class and Days of Future Past.
As do I. Yeah.
And I have no issue with her in either of those movies. She's one of my favorite parts about First Class. So it was one of the things I was like, oh, wow, I really like what they did with Mystique there. And then in this movie, it's a weird thing where I don't think that she's really that much more of a main character than many other people. Like, there are some people where I can lay out a more clear character arc. Mystique in this, it's like she's been on both sides at one point, and then at the end of this, it's like, well, what does she really actually feel? Like, I know what she's doing, but I don't know what Mystique really thinks about all of this necessarily.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Well, we talked about this longer than we should have for how we felt about. We'll be with you again on Sunday night for the spoilercast, and we'll get as many of our contributors together to talk about the movie and all the ins and the outs of it. Lots of stuff that'll be a lot of fun to delve into. And I didn't talk about a lot of my favorite things because I don't want to spoil some of those things. But I should mention that Jean and Cyclops are in a good place. That's a thing that will excite people. So as I said, moving forward, there's plenty of potential awesome. So that's good.
Yeah, I really liked all of the new cast, honestly.
The girl that plays Storm is fantastic. She gets nothing to do, but she's probably the person I'm most excited about. Like, she looks really off the page. She looks really excited to be there and be in that role. And
they've been showing her in so much of the marketing. Like, there was a thing that played before the movie where it was like her like thanking you for watching, and she's like, oh, blah blah blah, this movie created this many jobs and all this stuff like that. But like, I've seen her in tons of like things like where it's just her talking to the camera. Like, it would be really interesting.
Maybe it's just because she's really good at that.
A more prominent role than like any of the other X-Men, given like how weak of a character she was in the original.
Well, but also given Storm's history, that would make perfect sense. And we put her in a place similar to where she is in the early days of X-Men comics, so there's plenty to do with her moving forward. And I should also mention, just because we got to see that actress speak, she's faking an African accent, like spot on. I just thought that was really cool. I was glad that we because that introducing the film thing was kind of weird and silly, I thought, and then I was like, oh, I'm glad we saw that, because now I know that she doesn't actually have an African accent, and she's nailing that. Well, everybody, thanks as always for watching. Sure appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again on Sunday for more X-Men Apocalypse talk. I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Rasco.
Do 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 do.